Here.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we're going live now.
Oh shit.
Oh,
Please someone tell me you can hear me.
Yes.
yes. You got it.
Steve, you got some distortion.
How much?
Good.
Obscene? Like unlistenable or just
Not when you're doing the lighter notes, I guess you could say it's fine, but when you hit the harder ones, it's pretty evident.
Well, I'm glad you guys could join us. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the Autonomous Collective. The After Hours show has just begun.
Okay, bye.
Live streaming. Good evening, Anne. I'm joined by Professor Emily, a retired college professor, a community member at the Daily Kos. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Anne.
Good evening. Interesting day, interesting week.
Yeah, kind of horrendous.
Tough week.
Worst in humanity was on display this week. Quite shocking.
The seventh day of the invasion.
Yes, unspeakable atrocities happening in Israel and Palestine, mostly in Gaza. When I plan this meal, I'll be your cook this evening, by the way. The events of the week don't make for don't make you really nothing very appetizing comes to mind. But what I thought to make was a traditional Gazan dish of lentil soup. They're super simple ingredients that cook very fast and can be made with next to no ingredients. We will be using mainly lentils, and if there's a squash available, you can have a squash, an onion, garlic. Some spices we'll be throwing in are cumin and Blaine's favorite, the seed version of cilantro, coriander seeds, with some fresh cilantro to boot, little olive oil. The idea here was that I would make a dish that required next to no energy to cook. I'll be cooking this with a pressure cooker. These are split red lentils. So they disintegrate in about 5 minutes of cooking. 10 minutes, they become creamy. Inside the pressure cooker, it's quick. Using a pressure cooker saves energy. So in a situation where you have a limited amount of electricity or propane, they're very, very helpful, very easy dish.
You don't have to pre-soak those, do you?
No, they take 5 minutes under pressure and they're done. So it's quite one of the quickest soups in the world. Very simple, protein rich. I've got a traditional flatbread here, which we call flatbrød in Norway. It's reminiscent of the matzah. It's an unleavened cracker, basically. We traditionally eat this with soup, but this You could roll, if you have flour, you can roll it thin and put it on the hot stones in the sun and make your flatbread for your simple soup. You could also cook it on the open flame. But and you'll be going into the details about what was going on this week. I just wanted to read an announcement from the Norwegian Refugee Council. The Secretary General Jan Egeland, they released a statement today. The past few days they've been releasing statements on the Israeli ultimatum to Gaza must be reversed. Statement by Jan Egeland, Secretary General of the Norwegian Council on Israeli Relocation, ultimatum to Gaza citizens. The Israeli military demand for 1.2 million civilians in northern Gaza relocate to its south within 24 hours, absent of any guarantees of safety or return, would amount to the war crime of forcible transfer. It must be reversed. The collective punishment of countless civilians, among them children, women, and the elderly, in retaliation for acts of horrible terror undertaken by armed men, is illegal under international law. My colleagues inside Gaza confirm that there are countless people in the northern parts who have no means to safely relocate under the constant barrage of fire. The loss of civilian lives caused by deliberate or indiscriminate use of force is a war crime for which the perpetrators will have to answer. We fear that Israel may claim that Palestinians who could not flee northern Gaza can be erroneously held as directly participating in the hostilities and thus targeted. The United States, the UK, the European Union, and other Western and Arab nations who have influence over the Israeli political and military leadership must demand that the illegal and impossible order to relocate is immediately rescinded. That was from the Norwegian Refugee Council. Get to cooking. I was wondering if you had any comment on that. Just the appalling situation, impossible.
Well, it pretty much fits in with the thing I was going to rant about a little bit later on the issue of ethnic cleansing and apartheid.
Yeah. It's, I heard Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli foreign minister and former ambassador to the U.S., Israeli Israeli ambassador to the U.S. He was on Al Jazeera and talking almost gleefully about how we just need to open this humanitarian corridor to Egypt. Egypt has to comply. We need Egypt to comply, and we'll simply create a tent city of 2 million people. He likened it to the Syrian refugees that fled to neighboring Turkey.
And we all know how that worked out.
Well, I'm going to get to my prep work here.
Okay. Let me share my screen and okay. I assume you can see that.
Yep. We got a box on the right-hand side. Chat, I assume.
Yes, that's my chat box. Anyway, welcome to day 597 of the Ukraine invasion. And nobody's forgotten about either Ukraine or Israel in these days. The domestic United States response to this by the GOP was to try and leverage one against the other. Many GOP politicians wanted to take the Ukraine, whatever the United States had promised to Ukraine, and just simply shift it to Israel, because it's a very cynical ploy. Of course, they want to appeal to Jewish votes, whatever that might be. And in fact, in its most absurd version, one of the candidates for president on the GOP side in 2024, Ron DeSantis, decided that he would announce that he would offer to have mission of mercy flights to Israel to bring back any Floridians who happen to be in Israel. Now, little do they know that they might not wind up in Florida, but perhaps Nantucket Island or someplace, or Martha's Vineyard. Anyway, it's the best I can do for a joke. The point being is that the beatings will continue until morale improves. There are penal units in Vidica or Adivika in Ukraine. It's actually a fairly serious thing, but it has a lot of disinformation. The Russians decided that they would put all their prisoner troops, not unlike what Wagner had done with other prison troops. There's still prison troops, people being recruited out of the prisons in Russia. And they are in their not mobilization, but their draft conscription phase in Russia. And so whoever has been dragged out of prison is now at the front end of a certain set of attacks, very sort of mass charge attacks where you have a lot of people running forward and consequently getting wiped out quickly. So there's that at the personnel level. They put a lot of vehicles have been destroyed, and we have a little bit of video from that. But the point being is that the Russians are trying to execute a pincer movement, and the issue with the prisoners is that there's a punishment battalion, not unlike the ones in World War II, where if you're at the front and you're being pushed forward, if you decide to retreat, they will shoot you. So in effect, you have no choice but to advance and to get wiped out. So there have been probably double the casualties than usual, and it's not been successful. What they've been trying to execute, though, and you can see here on the map where Andrivka is, it's at a point that looks like there's a pincer movement that is going on, and sorry about that. Well, they appear to have captured a little bit of territory, but they've given that up. There was counterattacks by the Ukrainians, and you can see on this map what happened in this particular pincer-style movement. In some ways, this is for domestic consumption. That is, they've been trying to get successes like in Bakhmut, which they didn't succeed in doing either. So there's been a kind of it appears like a stalemate, but there's war going on every day, and there's a variety of armored vehicles, some interesting video of the kind of massed attack and the degree of coordination by Ukrainian forces in particular. Russians are slightly less coordinated, so to speak. But there's plenty of satellite photos, which is either an advantage or disadvantage, but folks are being at least on the Ukrainian side, being able to coordinate the satellite map with some of the video that comes in from drones. So you can actually see, not so much in real time, but at least as a report, a constructed version of what these small battles are, how the battle proceeds. note, of course, it is these large fields with lines, tree lines, and most of the issues are trying to track down things that are hidden in the tree lines, and of course, it's important to have other kinds of technologies to track those same things. But you know, a lot of the battles are recorded on satellite, so you can see some of those kinds of things happening. And anyway, recently the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, has put out an order of battle for the Russian regular ground forces. Those of you fascinated by all the technology that's being used, of course, there's a lot that's been sort of lost, and this was done in January, and they've had a lot of losses. So in other things, that there's continuing offensive and counteroffensive actions. Drone strikes, and the latest news is that some Russian ships have been hit by either marine drones or aerial ship missiles. It's one or the other. It appears to be, at least in one case, one of their seagoing drones. Some of which ride on the surface, some of which ride slightly below the surface. It's a variety of technologies. They have about 5 different types. The Russians have some as well, but Ukrainians don't put any ships out there, so they really don't do very much good. So the current losses are from yesterday or today, from yesterday, 990 casualties on the Russian side, losing somewhere around 40-something numbers of vehicles. Their high-level engagements, and it's the biggest single-day troop loss for the second half of 2023. And it's a record for tanks and a record 7 days for armored personnel vehicles as well. So there is slight up-tempo with a lot of, the interesting thing about this war is that people are keeping track. There's a lot of record keeping going on in this war, and people try to keep track of positions, but not give away anything that would be actually, sort of vulnerable relative to a military action. But I think you can see from this.
On that? What do you mean by keeping track, and who and where?
Military bloggers and people looking at open source information with OSINT materials. But it's also a SIGINT as well, in the sense that Telegram, I think, is the source for a lot of people who are reporting in real time activities, and which can be dangerous, of course. There've been very fatal mistakes, but for the most part, the maps have been coming in with about a 24-hour lag, so none of these things are in the same place, but it does show at relatively recent time what the order of battle kind of looks like. And so they're still fighting on the south end. This is the Chuck Farrer mapping, and he does really great maps. They're just really good maps, worth looking at, simply because he indicates the types of units, their displacement, and his maps are pretty stable in that sense. He puts out 1 or 2 or 3 a day, and they're useful. And he also has a lot of equipment reporting, which also is very useful to see what the current technology is. The Ukrainians are adapting some very old technology. The S-200 rocket, which is originally a surface-to-air missile, has now been modified. I think they have several hundreds of these things because they're left over from the Soviet period, and they've been modified. The Ukrainians are incredibly good at adapting technology, so they've changed them so that they can be delivered as surface-to-surface missiles. The Russians do something very similar. In particular, they have all their damn tanks. They have a lot of T-55 tanks sitting in storage that they drag out, and it's unclear how many are in the field, but they have been using them. There's currently and the issue that is very contentious for the U.S. is the the change in or the delivery of all the usual kinds of pieces of technology in the budget, which is, of course, under assault by the fact that the United States Congress is not working because the GOP can't figure out who to pick for speaker. In the case of what's recently been delivered, it has been, for example, here 500 GBU 39 small diameter bombs and about actually 1 million rounds of NATO ammunition, 308 ammunition or 762 ammunition. Accordingly, U.S. defense company stocks have surged nearly 30 billion this week. Certain members of Congress, in fact, have profited from this. Notably members of the GOP, one of whom, Austin Scott, had a failed bid against Jim Jordan, but Austin Scott made a as it were a killing this week on defense stocks. Convicted Russian agent Maria Butina, who helped leverage or enable some espionage and the transfer of about $30 million to the NRA, and who was arrested for espionage and then traded back to the Russians, and who has a television show. She gloated.
Love knows no bounds, and love knows no bounds.
Oh, indeed. Or well, her poor boyfriend, from whatever his name was in South Dakota. I think he hasn't gone to jail yet, but I think he's been convicted. She's gloated on Telegram about Republican Congress thwarting aid to Ukraine and the dysfunction in Congress. And of course, she has an opinion. She knows these Republicans pretty well, considering how many people she was photographed with in the Republican Party. So let's see. President Zelensky recognized the 1932 to 33 Holodomor as genocide against the Ukrainian people, and this, the whole business of working out the history of Ukraine is really problematic, and of course has a variety of versions of it, and we can have a much longer conversation about it. But I think that the history is being to sort itself out. Now, Russia announced that it will allocate 46 billion rubles, which is about $460 million from the budget, to re-educate children that have been taken from Ukraine. The project is called Patriotic Education of Russian Citizens, and it's a little problematic in that sense. But the textbooks are saying, everything's okay. This is a good war for the Russians in that sense. Needless to say, protests are still happening. There's some examples from a recent one in Vienna. Weapons have been delivered. That was last night's report. Tonight's report is going to have a variety of things, including probably an update on the so-called sunken ship. Apparently, and this is one report, that these prisoner detachments have lost 2,000 personnel in 3 days of fighting in Avdiivka, or whatever, Avdiivka. My apologies to Ukrainians. And there'll be a additional report on the losses. There's also a report that's come in. Some people have been tracking the routes of North Korean munitions transfers into Russia. They actually tagged a large set of containers that went off ships and etc., and went by rail to Western Russia near the Ukrainian border. So North Korean munitions have made it to the front. These are largely artillery rounds, probably 152 millimeter rounds for for mobile artillery and fixed artillery. Ukrainian pilots are now being trained in Arizona on the simulators in Tucson. There's an Air National Guard base in Tucson, Arizona that is it has a simulator set. Several months ago, a sort of a pilot program, as it were. A couple of aviators from Ukraine went to assess the equipment and to see whether it was going to work out. So apparently it did, and now Ukrainian aviators are cycling through Tucson, Arizona, of all places, to prepare for F-16 flying, and the transfers are eventually coming from places like Denmark and Belgium and the Netherlands. All of these are going to be, of course, replaced by F-35s, which is, I suppose, a boon for the aircraft industry in the United States and the military-industrial complex. So students in Russian classrooms will be told that Ukraine started the war, that these are from textbooks, while Russian soldiers are now fighting shoulder to shoulder for goodness and the truth. Okay. Goodness and the truth. That's kind of what's going on in Ukraine these days. Most of the things are focusing on America and, those kinds of issues. But I will begin a rant in a moment. Let's see how food is doing. How is food going?
Yeah, so I sauteed the onions and garlic and added the spices at the end. First I toasted the cumin and coriander, ground those in the mortar and pestle, sauteed the onion and garlic, threw in the spices, and then I chopped up the winter squash, put that in there with the lentil, washed the lentils. And one of the key things about life in Gaza, life in Palestine, life on the edge, you never waste anything. So most people throw out the pulp with the seeds, but we can throw those in there for extra flavor and nutrients, and use everything. So we're going to put this under pressure, and in about 10 minutes, it'll be 7 minutes maybe, it'll be finished, and then we cream it up and serve it.
Yum.
Just going to season it with salt and some bouillon, since that's what we've got around. Oh, and we could put in a little cinnamon. Not such a big fan. So the popularity of pressure cookers waned after World War II, and they hadn't seen a resurgence in popularity since the Instant Pot came out, which made things a lot safer, basically push button pressure cooking, which sounds kind of terrifying. But,
well,
yeah.
It's not really under pressure, so that's the good thing about Instant Pots, right?
No, they are.
Well, they are under pressure.
Full-blown electric pressure cookers. And
fuzzy
it is
logic controls, yeah.
Yeah, literally push button. So I was kind of alarmed the first time I tried one out, because I said, "Is that all there is?" It just seemed a little too easy. I'm nervous with these modern pressure cookers, where we don't have the whistle anymore. We've got this kind of pressurized valve that, when the pressure builds, this pushes out, and then that signifies when it's up to a certain pressure, and then you can turn it down. But it's silent, so you don't really hear it. And if you're busy in the kitchen, you might not, you might miss it, and it'll start to whistle once it gets way past there. But you're kind of losing air out the seal and everything, which isn't cool. But a lot less stress without the whistle, that's for sure. So with whenever you cook beans or legumes under pressure, you can see the foam building up. You want to put oil, make sure that you've got oil in there. The oil will break down the foam, because what happens is the foam can build up and then block the seal. And then you get the explosions. Explosions. So now we're bubbling away. Oh, I'm gonna need to season it first. A little bit. Maybe some good old-fashioned MSG will go a long way. A little umami there. White powder of umami.
Does the squash add sweetness to it as well?
Oh, yeah, it's very sweet. Or not as sweet as sweet potato, but it does make it sweeter. My brother-in-law is a new baby, well, 6 months old now, and shifting to solid foods. And one of the things that I fed my kids is essentially, they've been living on something like this all their lives. It's the first baby food they had. It's lentil and winter squash. Since they're accustomed to the sweetness of mother's milk, it's really easy for them to transition to something like this. And it's protein rich and
indeed.
Yeah, nice.
All good.
Okay, I'll get that under pressure and you can rant away.
Oh, well, let me see if I can get this rolling here. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. But the reality, of course, is that a 500,000 folks in Gaza have been displaced. 500,000 right now.
Talk about a pressure cooker.
Indeed. So far, so this apartheid situation, which has been there for decades, could now become actual ethnic cleansing. I mean, you could call it ethnic cleansing before, and of course, we're not yet ready for the G word, I suppose, but just basically what I did today was put a few facts up, actual facts, historical facts about when ethnic cleansing occurs, and it's a term that comes from a Russian massacre in the 19th century, and so it's not that old a term unless you want to count Alexander the Great and the Thebans or whatever. But in terms of a language, the first use of a concept of cleansing, and particularly in reference to ethnicity, comes from the Russians, the Imperial Russians, that is. So I put in my little piece here a standard map of Palestine, the West Bank, and Gaza under Israeli occupation since '67, the 1949 armistice line, which this history is, lengthy and quite in depth, but it's important to see that the shape has transitioned to sort of shrink the relative Palestinian elements of Israel. And so there is Israeli control, there's walls and fences all over the damn place. And you can see, and this is where Jerusalem is. My mental map of Israel, not having lived there, is always to think of Tel Aviv in a different place. For some reason, I always think Jerusalem is northeast of Tel Aviv, and it isn't. Anyway, that's just me. Gaza is this little bit down here.
Well, one moment. It kind of feels that way. And when they talk about Jerusalem, they always talk about going up to Jerusalem. And you are actually coming from the floodplain up to Jerusalem. And just for people's, just to get your bearings on distances here, Tel Aviv sits 45 minutes from Jerusalem by car without traffic.
Everything is a little close.
It's about the size of Rhode Island. I think Rhode Island might be a little bigger.
And which, of course, makes every little bit of activity very contentious. I've left the image on this screen of Gaza. It's to the left. 2.2 million people in that fairly small space. And the most built up area is Gaza City, there in the north. Israel, the IDF, has announced is that, and I think we're in the last 5 hours of the announcement of that everyone in Gaza City should get the hell out of town in 24 hours, essentially telling 1 million people that they have to move and get rolling. A lot of people have been, whether they've been walking or taking buses or cars or whatever. The problem, of course, is on the Egyptian border, they have not opened the border to Egypt. Egypt is reluctant to do that because they don't want to have a whole bunch of refugee camps and a variety of other reasons. It's all very complicated. There are tunnels that go from Egypt to Gaza anyway. The thing about infrastructure destruction for the IDF is that they want to destroy the underground tunnel network in Gaza City, as well as they've been, bombing buildings for the last week.
Well, apparently the bombing had reports were that the heavy bombing could be felt 20 kilometers away or more in terms of the ground shaking. So they're using a different type of ordnance, apparently. And one thing before they even get to, if they're even able to move, so people in hospitals aren't going to be moved. That's not possible.
No.
Even if they could get in a car or a bus, the infrastructure is so bombed that how are they going to get through the destroyed infrastructure to get down there in time? And this is all just reminiscent of the foundation of the state.
Indeed.
Just on a more catastrophic scale. Never before seen.
All urban conflict has those kinds of constraints. Speaking of Stalingrad, for example, Stalingrad was impossible for the Nazis to take because they had bombed it so much that the rubble actually served as defensive positions, which may or may not occur, assuming that the IDF decides they're going to come in and do an actual incursion into the country. This is not the first time that they've done an incursion, but this is a fairly massive incursion with 300,000 reserve troops, a lot of which are reservists. And the issue, though, of course, is that apartheid is sort of been there. And for some reason, a lot of people have it's sort of that open secret that, they have these huge walls and, guard towers and stuff like that. And people get shot all the time. And I hate to say all the time, but it truly is all the damn time. Ethnic cleansing can be understood as the expulsion of a population from a given territory. And now that sounds relatively neutral, but trying to get 1 million people to move in 24 hours is a pretty interesting problem. So just before midnight on Thursday, Israel's military ordered more than 1 million Palestinians living in northern Gaza to evacuate to the southern part of the enclave within the next 24 hours. The UN has called on Israel to withdraw the evacuation order and warned that this could lead to devastating humanitarian consequences, needless to say. So it is the 7th day of the invasion. 1,300 people have died in Israel. 150 people are being held hostage. Hamas said that 13 people have died in the bombardment. So 13 of hostages have died. And, this is the fog of war going on here.
It seems remarkable that so few have died.
Oh, indeed.
We don't know how many are buried under the rubble.
Well, they've the sort of standard practice, I think, is to disperse any group of hostages. There's probably no more than a couple of hostages in any one place relative to hiding them. And one doesn't know how extensive the tunnel network is, but that's probably an interesting secret. 1,400 civilians have been killed. And there is a total blockade. It's a siege presently. They shut the power off, the electrical power off last night. And we just simply don't know when the expected ground, it is expected that there will be a ground invasion, but parallel to this, there have been missile launches from Syria and from Lebanon, Hezbollah in particular in Lebanon, into Israel, and a journalist got killed. Several were wounded today. And so these are, it's not getting any better. And the mainstream media has been filled with stories of, heroism or courage or all kinds of awfulness. Although there have been, for example, the decapitated baby story got, unfortunately, is an example of how information gets distorted. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there wasn't brutality and people got, burned alive in buildings and shot, and plenty of people died, needless to say. We're up to, I think, 2,000 now, or 2,500. It's not going to get any better for a while. At least 423,000 people, that is 20% of the Gazan population, Gaza's population, have been displaced by the airstrikes, the Israeli airstrikes that began on Sunday. Another 175 Gazans have fled their homes since Saturday, taking refuge in UN shelters or schools. So this is essentially, we're at about 500,000 or so people displaced. Which is a significant number of people, and I think does qualify for a kind of ethnic cleansing. The Institute for the Study of War and Critical Threats has been doing mapping of the conflict with rocket launch mapping. Most of those are available because you can see that on the NASA FIRES satellite data. You can actually see where, rockets are being launched and where they land and stuff like that. It's been interesting to see that. There's a lot of records in nearly real time for all this activity. There are diplomatic efforts going about. The present moment is Qatar is doing negotiation. Some say that Saudi is involved. There are a variety of folks involved in trying to work through the hostage situation, as well as trying to ameliorate what is probably going to be a ground incursion. This is, as of 3:00 yesterday, there are West Bank clashes going on, significant clashes of essentially small arms fire, and people engaging each other in all these kinds of activities. I included in the thing I wrote today about the Israel's 55-year occupation of the Palestine territory, and a report by the UN Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights, and it is talking about the Palestinian territories as a kind of open-air prison, specifically Gaza. That is, it is probably one of the largest open-air prisons in the world.
Just to comment on that.
Yes.
The situation in the West Bank is a little different than Gaza in terms of movement. The West Bank has the apartheid wall that they've built, which is a 8-meter high steel reinforced concrete divider that not only encircles most of the entirety of the West Bank, north and south, but it also encircles individual population centers. So there's walls within walls, and the Israeli army has closed all checkpoints throughout the West Bank, the last I've heard.
Yes,
So their ability
I-
to move and coordinate is much reduced compared to Gaza. But yeah, the situation in Gaza is way worse because of the direct bombing now. But there is a lot of, I believe there was airstrikes in Jenin refugee camp.
yes,
Did you read about that?
yes, I heard about that as well.
Mm.
You know, it's the fog of war is up and quite dense in that context. It is a kind of doom spiral, and we'll see. The weekend should be interesting. The thing that I included was to put in this Circassian genocide, and someone tried to claim that this was false equivalence. All I was putting in was the first instance of historical identification of large-scale ethnic cleansing, and it's there during the 19th century, and done by the Imperial Russians. This is in the Caucasus, and 2 million people were involved. 2 million Circassians, that is nearly all of the total population, either killed or expelled to the Ottoman Empire. So pretty significant. And this is the kind of history I think that we're stuck with. Needless to say, when I put this up, it got the usual thing over at Coast. It's there's the population there, the community is quite divided on Israeli-Palestine issues, and discussions. The comment section, for example, on this particular piece is about 2 to 1, which usually means that people are arguing with each other, and there's a significant. You can go look at the kind of problematic logic that operates and on a piece like this, because I wrote it strictly and as objectively and neutrally as I could, because once you start putting like a commentary from specific people, like with generals on one side or whatever on the other side, it gets all nuts. People start building entire arguments, and then including premises from the Holocaust, and making all these, that's why you have a 9/11 comparison and all of this other stuff that goes on that makes the argument a lot crazier than what actually is happening. The reality, of course, and not enough has been discussed, although I think it gets mentioned in mainstream media a little bit, that just doesn't get enough airtime. And that is that there are 500 to 600 Palestinian Americans in Gaza, and not much has been paid attention, but they are Americans. And this has not been a lot asked about from the State Department about what's happening in that context. So as much as the mainstream media has been interviewing people who have lost friends, relatives, all sorts of folks, and the anguish, that you see, and which is the stuff of live television. There are other people engaged in this activity, and it's incredibly problematic. There's very little media coverage of West Bank interaction, so that's also interesting for a variety of other reasons. I think because that really was the kind of hot zone before Gaza, and so
all of their large percentage of their focus was on the West Bank.
Yes,
because Gaza seemed contained.
Well, yes. It's just interesting to see how heavily controlled Gaza is in terms of exit and egress. It's just, quite fascinating when people, talk more about that, and you see programs that talk about those kinds of issues. Anyway, we hope that the UN will move more swiftly in terms of trying to deal with this, considering that this is a sort of major military event, And as has been mentioned before, there are two carrier groups from the U.S. in the region, which is has a whole nother context to it as well. And the usual discussions of Iranian and other countries' politics are also involved. Particularly
a question about the U.S. involvement there, sending the aircraft carrier. It's a projection of force for threats to Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and ultimately Iran. But is there any discussion of U.S. special forces or U.S. troops landing to?
Yes, there are
get Americans, because they do have a history of going into Lebanon.
Indeed. There is actually American special ops are in somewhere in Israel right now. There has been a report of that. They have several groups operating in there. We'll know whether there's anything interesting or important that will come from that. Needless to say, yes, they are. It is projection of power. It is trying to essentially warn off others like Syria or Lebanon. And when it gets worse, of course, there'll probably be some kind of, these are the strikes that are not projected from, for example, Iraq, from American base, the American base in Iraq on Syria, but this is just additional firepower in that context. So that's what's happening. It is problematic in the least. And now that they've shut the power off, it is probably incredibly difficult in Gaza City.
No water. If 90% of the water was not palatable or couldn't drink it before because of cholera and whatever.
Yes.
I imagine 100% is, well, it's not even flowing anymore. How long can that last?
That's unfortunately a good question. That one of the biggest issues has been, of course, the infrastructure support of Gaza. And the usual kind of threats on that anyway, that have been for quite a while. So it just a misery builds on misery here. I think what we'll probably see is some relief on the ability for people to escape Gaza to Egypt at some moment. I don't know. The diplomacy is probably working overtime. Secretary of State Blinken, after his visit to Israel, he went to a whole bunch of other places. He went to Jordan. He probably went to 4 other countries in the last day to sort of show the flag, I guess, and make whatever entreaties that he had to. So State Department is working a lot harder, but we still don't have an ambassador. Is that the deal? I can't remember. I think we don't have an ambassador.
There is one major issue regarding humanitarian corridors that I haven't heard in the Western media, but what's happening is that there is ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip to a foreign country, Egypt in this case.
Yes.
That is exactly what happened during the foundation, the War for Independence for Israel.
Yes, exactly.
They pushed Arab populations into Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt.
Yes.
The question for Palestinians choosing to flee to safety, quote unquote, if they can, is whether they'll be able to get back.
Yes.
So slow motion genocide or ethnic cleansing. What is the line there between ethnic cleansing and genocide?
well, genocide is the killing.
Actual murder.
Actual murder. I would assert that's the difference. Ethnic cleansing is simply moving populations around. And needless
So
to
the
say,
situation in Gaza, where 1.2 million people in North Gaza, only a fraction will be able to flee. I assume once the Israeli troops get inside Gaza, every single person, whether they're a civilian or not, will be treated as a combatant because they were given the warning to flee.
that's correct. Israel, we were looking at that last night. Lane showed us a little thing where there were one of the Israeli defense guys got really upset about the fact that well, there's a certain discourse about human shields that often pops up in this discourse, and it's a rationalization that you can kill citizens because they're being used as shields. Well, which is, you know, I don't need to go into the kind of flawed logic that is.
The claim by the Israelis is that Hamas has their main bunker is under Shifa Hospital.
Yes, they've
in the
claimed
north.
that.
That's the largest hospital in Gaza, and it's in the north.
Yes, this and it is this sort of it's unfortunately become a trope. You know, that only a certain type of character would hide their military headquarters under hospitals or whatever. You know, in terms of basic logic, everyone should do that, I suppose. But needless to say, that's kind of where we are right now. We'll know more probably on Sunday or so, you know, once the weekend. We'll see probably a lot of things probably cascade forward on Monday. There have been an increase in flights from a variety of countries to try to evacuate citizens, which was
Just heard about Norway's flights. Yes.
No, I don't know.
But about 400 hundreds of people, I think, were there.
So much is happening anyway. It is, of course, complicated by the usual kinds of security matters and just the fact that probably all the trying to get to and fro Israel is probably pretty difficult relative to airplane traffic. Anyway, that's kind of my little rant today, that it is in fact apartheid, and to remind one that, you know, this has been practiced for decades. This is nothing new. And all of this has been ratcheted up with the sort of right-wing shift of the Israeli government, partially to get Netanyahu off the hook relative to his crimes.
I'd kind of disagree. I don't think it's ratcheted up as Oslo is really quite to blame because it was the blueprint for apartheid.
Oh yeah,
we're just seeing the results of the pressure cooker that created.
Yes. But there was some mention that the new unity government has included some people who were not normally included and whose reputations are being rehabilitated. They're kind of criminal cronies of Netanyahu are being included in these discussions, which is interesting. It's a political rehabilitation. But anyway, I just saw something about that. I can't remember who the guy's name is, but there's been some other things occurring on that level.
Okay, I've not heard about that. Oh, it's soup time if you're
soup time. Well, let me stop with my little craziness. When I already did, I guess. What the hell happened? There we go.
A quick release, just to unlock it here. If the pressure's gone down a bit, you can do that. Otherwise, you can run it under cold water, and then the pressure will be reduced quickly. And you can just slide it. That was 7 minutes cooking, and then just more or less a natural release, about 10 minutes, I think it was took to come down the pressure. And we've got fully cooked, creamy. We can fish out some of the pulp. And leave it at that. So with some lemon juice. Enough. If you like, you can put some turmeric in to make it more yellow, so it's not as pale. I usually will add turmeric. I'm not using squash. So we've got nice creamy vegetarian soup. Handful of minutes. Taste.
How is it?
Very tasty, not too sweet. And you always want to be careful when you're seasoning, not to put too much up front, because the beans or legumes will soak up a lot of salt. So just wait till it's cooked to do it with the most seasoning. But that kind of got it down.
As you're ladling it out, I might remind folks that in 90 minutes is going to be Twilight Zone. I think we're having Twilight Zone tonight in all excitement. So come and look at our schedule, Autonomous Collective, the Autonomous Collective, and we have lots that is going to happen. Writing stuff. Tonight, I think Venture Brothers is not going to be here at midnight. So I think there'll be
Postponing till next week.
Indeed. And tomorrow at 6 o'clock, there will be more dis and dat information. I will continue on my little issues with ideology and rent and a variety of other things. And on at 3 o'clock for Weekly Marks on Sunday, after I assume we're going to have a little bit of hopefully hammer and sickle, but if not, at 3 o'clock on Sunday, we'll begin the reading of the 1844 economic and philosophic manuscripts by Marx. It's only 81 pages. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to go plow through it and probably maybe 10 pages a week, if that. And because it's pretty dense for Marx crap. But needless to say, almost right after that, at 5 o'clock on Sunday, will be more Columbo. And so we will watch an episode of Columbo and give John a hard time. And on Monday, there will be writing, the writer's workshop, as well as a variety of interesting things that will also include, I think, some some chat GPT stuff perhaps, and
Fear and loathing
sports,
with ChatGPT.
I think, and then we're going to have sports
Fun
on
and loathing.
Monday, so that should be interesting as well. Anyway, come and look at our schedule. We'll be doing other things. There's the short story folks are going to be meeting on Tuesday, and you get on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday at 6 o'clock more this and that, where I'm trying to figure stuff out. And on Thursday, I will attempt to get to the penultimate chapter of Brad DeLong's Slouching Towards Utopia, his economic history of the 20th century. So I know that's that may not seem horribly exciting, but whatever. We do what we do.
And
Nice.
For any early birds, I'll be going on another mushroom hunt on
Cool.
Sunday morning. I don't know if you have the schedule there. I think it's
No, we don't.
one minute here.
Are you
Sunday,
going with
7
those-
a.m.
Are you
7
going?
a.m.
Are you going with that same group of folks? The couple of academics and the ladies and their psilocybin? No.
Different group.
Oh,
We're in the same region, so I don't know, maybe some of the same people will show up, but it's the same organization. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll get what are they called in English? Hedgehog mushrooms. There's about 3 different types of hedgehog mushrooms, plus Contra, which are funnel chanterelle, and those are the main ones. So we'll see.
perhaps you could engage one of the little old ladies and their psilocybin mushrooms and just sort of ask them about it. Innocently. It would be nice to know.
Well, one said she puts them on pizza, and I suggested soup works better.
Indeed. Magic soup.
That's not happening. Nobody does that here.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Just allegedly. So we made winter squash lentil soup in a matter of minutes.
Yum.
Super simple.
Yum, yum, yum. I think we're close to the end of our little broadcast here, our little taping section. Remember, it's the autonomouscollective.net, and come by and visit us.
Sign up for the newsletter and receive the schedule and all the relevant links, and you'll be able to join the Discord from there.
Bring your own stuff. I don't like being the only person yammering far too much about left stuff, for example. I am going to bring in some folks. There's some people, for example, the group who, by any means necessary, I'm not sure I'm going to get them or not, and they do have a certain kind of a left political position, but I'm going to try and see if I can get them because they just got fired by Sputnik, the Russian blogging thing. So we'll see.
And I'll try to get a hold of the human rights worker and lawyer and professor that I spoke with at the Palestinian conference on Israel-Palestine at the Red Cross down in Oslo a few weeks ago.
That would be nice. So less than 90 minutes to Twilight Zone. So stick around, please. After we stop recording, we will continue yakking.
After hours.
Our after hours will continue. It will move on and on and on.
And on that
Sometimes
note,
it goes on all night. So come by.
Take care. We'll